Hey everyone, I'm joined by a very special guest who I have taken far too long to join on the show. I can't wait to introduce him. Hey everyone, you're joining me, your host, Max Pears. I hope you are playing and or making the games that you all love. And as I mentioned here, I took way too long to get this lovely man on the show. We've been chatting about design for years and years, so to finally have him here is amazing. This is the ever-present, the ever-gentle giant that is Jonathon. How you doing, mate?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, buddy. It definitely has been a long time. Long time coming, I think. I can't even think like the last time we probably saw each other.
I was going to say, I think that was back at Eurogamer, I want to say 3 years ago now.
Damn, that was a long, 3-4 years ago. That was a long time ago.
Yes, it was. So no, it's been a long time since we've been able to touch each other's faces. Whatever you make of that. No, but like it's great to have you here. And for those who don't know, Jonathon is a great level designer who is very present, especially in the English community of level design, because you go around a lot, mate, and do a lot of talks at many festivals, really.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like we both spoke about it at length before, like being able to share like your passion for something, right? It's always great, and that's kind of where the talks stem from. It's like the whole point of like sharing knowledge, because one thing I did learn was the way I built up my knowledge base was ideally learning from others. Like textbooks can only get you so far in the level design community, but like seeing GDC talks, and I see us learning from each other and how we interpret our information, it's only going to make like the level design community stronger, right? We'll learn how to interpret each other's work and then how to apply it, and we just end up with better levels overall.
Yeah, man. No, I think that's it. And also, I'm sure you noticed this as well because you've worked at a few companies yourself. Is each company has its own way of doing things as well, which only again broadens your horizon, and then you start to mix and match the best things that you enjoy at the places you're at to make your own kind of language and skill set in a sense.
Yeah, it's like you hit the nail on the head. It's like I don't think I've ever worked on a project that's always this like it's been identical to one I've worked on previously. Whether that's because of a genre change, just because of a studio change. It's like designed what you can pick up, the traits you take from project to project. You can't use them all in the same way. The principles are always there; they're always the same, but how you actually can implement and combine them is always different per project.
Yeah, no, exactly, mate. And we've kind of skipped ahead here because we're talking about learning.
Oh,
but
God, yeah.
let's learn a bit more about you. Can you tell the audience a bit about yourself, mate?
So I guess I've been working in the industry for over like 5 years now. Probably coming up close to 6. I kind of went the very traditional route. I went through education. I went to college. I went to uni. Then when I graduated, I did little bits of freelance actually in biz dev while
really?
I was still looking for a job and stuff. Yeah, just helping with some event management stuff, but which I'd been doing while I was in uni as like a networking opportunity. And then I got my first real break, I guess, with CodeSync, where I spent 3.5 years working there, which at the time was a small up-and-coming like indie studio who have gone on to kind of do very well. I think I joined them when they were like 12 to 13 people. When I left, I think they were like 75 to 80. And that was in the span of 3 years, which is quite erratic for a small company. But in that time, I worked on 5 games.
Awesome.
All of which have come out, but like you said, it's like every one of those games was different. Like I did 2D platformer, first person puzzle game, a kind of like light tactical RPG, which was quite narrative heavy. Did like a kind of party game, which was like a bunch of different mini games and stuff, which was quite fun. And then did another puzzle game for the Quest, which is what the last project I worked on before I left them. So you can see there's a lot of variety
man.
right off the bat. And then still going a bit. I went freelance for a while, and I joined I helped one of my friends at his company. I worked with Pocket Money Games for a while, in which time I got to help support the Super Hot Quest port, and help them kind of define a bunch of different games they had, because they had like a load of games, but like help them narrow down their focus to maybe like 3 or 4 to kind of take forward into development. And then earlier this year in May, I moved down to Brighton and joined Hangar 13, where I'm now a level designer full time.
Yeah, Mike, it's a huge congratulations to you, man, because you've had quite a stretch of, like you said, different sort of roles, as well as different sort of projects, most so I think it's really cool, man.
I think that hankers back to it, right? It's like level design's always been where I've wanted or found my attraction and kind of wanted to focus like all of my time. But obviously outside of a bigger studio, you're not really going to get to do that, right? Like specialization doesn't really exist. If you're at a team of 10 to 20 people, you're still going to be wearing a few different hats, like even within just the design field itself, because it's a multitude of roles in there. And I'm sure like you'll have dedicated game designers, you'll have system designers, the UI designers and level designers, and it's like they're all there, but they're still all under the field of design. But it's like whichever ones you pick and choose to kind of focus on is what you always build towards. So yeah, I guess like for a while, like I've always wanted to start shifting my focus more towards level design, which is, yeah, you touched on it earlier. That's why I started like delving into the talks and stuff like that, because it meant I actually had to know what I was talking about and I had to do research and stuff. So it kind of forces you to back it up, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that's it. And then I guess, mate, like you said, you've always wanted to get into the specific field of level design. And I guess what is it that attracted you to get into level design then, mate?
I think it's just the idea of like being able to kind of almost alter that moment-to-moment gameplay, right? Like from leading a player through an environment to even the interactions that'll go on within that environment. Sure, it's bringing a lot of other people's work together to bring the full execution to life, but there's that like kind of minute detail of like being able to guide players like kind of without the UI, which I think is something I kind of spawned and generated the idea when I was in uni, because it's what I did my dissertation on. And my dissertation was basically looking into kind of subtle player navigation techniques. So like, how do we guide the player without like the UI? And obviously in a mass market game, nobody's going to take that risk of a player getting lost. So the UI will always go in. But if we can at least build our levels to a point where they are navigatable or readable enough that you can actually get through them without it, then we've kind of done our jobs, right? We're using a mixture of techniques because we have so much available to us with technology now. Through kind of like being able to use lighting and color coding and things like that, we can lead people through spaces without the need to actually beat them over the head with a UI marker.
Yeah, no, I think that's it is such an interesting one. How, especially if you go back, I think to the early 2000s, how prevalent the UI marker was. You know, it was always present. And
there was no room for like exploration anymore. Like you knew exactly where you had to go.
Yeah.
It was just this star or something on a map, like go here. But there's this entire environment that you've got that you'll just ignore because you're like, oh no, I just have to go over there.
It's also crazy how it affects us as players to be like, oh. And I think, but now recently, especially with Breath of the Wild, God of War, they've really kind of taken a step back from this. I feel recently that I think is very interesting.
I think we're starting to see like more control almost being given back to the player. Like for instance, Breath of the Wild is a very open game, but you also mentioned God of War. And in all fairness, that's a linear game, right? That's like this very story-driven, like character-driven experience. But the actual environments themselves, like they did have like slight like off the beaten track, like side paths and stuff, and you could explore them or you could ignore them and just continue down the main path, but you never really got that sense of like being lost, right? And you did have the help with the compass and stuff, but you weren't beat over the head with all this like kind of UI like flashing in your face.
No, I think also though God of War is a very interesting one because, as you mentioned, Breath of the Wild is, you know, an open world game, and I think definitely redefined the genre in terms of how you do an open world game. I mean, still had towers, but just used differently. And I think, though, God of War as well, what I like about that one was, for a while, I found that one a tough one to nail down in terms of its level design. For sure, it had linear moments, but then it had this feeling of almost open world, especially because it was more like hub areas.
Yeah.
And then you also had that Metroidvania kind of feel, because there's only certain parts of these hubs that you could go through as you unlocked a new mechanic later. So I think they did both games phenomenal job, and both did a great work in level design.
Yeah, I think like you're touching on like the Metroidvania stuff as well. That's another thing that seems to be coming back. Like, especially, but like it came back in like the indie space like a while ago, like with a lot of like 2D kind of Metroidvania games coming back again. But it's nice to see it still has a place within like the AAA space as well, and it actually works really well. Okay, I can't go here yet. It's not that we're not telling the player they can't go there at all, but you know you're going to get something later on, and you're going to be able to go back, and it reuses space really well. It gives you an excuse to revisit locations that you've already gone, so it allows you to add more detail into one area because you know the player's going to actually spend quite a lot of time here.
Yeah, mate. No, I think that's, like I say, it is interesting again how it has come from, what was classed, I guess, as AAA with Castlevania. To indie and back up. So it's very interesting that, and I think you'll know especially about this when I'm working on many different games, is that there's so much ways to do levels and so many different styles of levels that people sometimes forget, because they're just like, oh, Call of Duty, that's that's a level. And
I think it's very, very easy to, like, if you're, especially like when you're first starting out, to go, okay, this game does really cool levels, or I really enjoy that, but you've also got to bear in mind, it's like, just because that does really cool levels doesn't mean it's going to work for you. You've got to take into account what is the project you're working on, what is the game you're working on. For instance, building a 2D platformer level, I'm not really going to be able to copy much of that to build a 3D puzzle environment. Like, they're two very different things. And even like the example there, like 2D to 3D, there are things you can obviously take between each other, but on a 2D game, you're not really guiding the player per se, because they can go left or right or up or down. They don't really have the full freedom that you get once you enter building 3D levels, which is always an interesting challenge in itself. But it's nice to see like games that kind of try to combine the two.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's also interesting with that is, even on a bit more of a granular level, the difference between third person and first person, that can change your levels drastically as well.
I mean, skill. It's like it's a quite interesting one, because it's like you build a third person environment and you're obviously following a metrics or anything like that works with like your character controller, and obviously it all comes together and it looks great. You run around that environment with a first person camera, it doesn't look as good, or some things seem a little off just because you're closer to it.
Yeah, mate. And it also changes like what is a comfortable space, because as you mentioned, you're closer to it. So what might be a perfect combat environment for third person now could be Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, because I've done the Switch, and there was definitely some things I noticed as well, as such as, I learned this from my one of my former leads, Mateusz. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, because I'll only do it disjustice. So, Mateusz, you know who you are, you beautiful beast. But he talked about, especially in first person, you've got to reveal information a lot more like slowly compared to third person, because in third person you obviously have a lot wider field of view, so you can take a lot more in without turning the camera. But when it's first person, you can't see as much. So it's kind of staggering the information instead of having the player have to scope around, because as soon as they have to turn the camera, then they could be vulnerable to attacks, or not understanding the space because they've missed something. So it's all very, very interesting, how it all works with it.
Yeah, I think you did, like, you're right on the money with that. It's like kind of like as in any first-person game, I'm sure, like when we play them, we can literally only really see what's in front of us. In a third-person game, like you said, you can always get the overview of the space because you have like the kind of frame, like the screen space around the character as well, right? He's not taking up the entire camera, so you can see quite a bit of the environment off to the left and right of you, and then you can kind of give that good overview, which makes it good for like strategic planning and stuff. So like giving the player a vantage point before a combat encounter allows them to actually strategize a little bit as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it, mate. I think it's it's just so many minute details. I mean, you mentioned it to the scale and to the metrics, and especially we spoke about this off of the air, but especially when people are coming in new, they don't quite understand metrics, and I think that's something that sadly is not mentioned enough, and it was definitely one of the things that caught me off guard. When I was building, when I got into working professionally, that it is something that you should, as a level designer, just instinctively either want to know because you need to know it, or make sure that you do know it off by heart, because each game has different metrics as well.
And I think it's one thing. Likewise, just like as you learn and you develop, like metrics, like you hear them thrown around all the time, and like I think one of the misconceptions was that people used to just think it was only important for art, to get the scale right of like assets and everything like that. But no, if your level metrics are off, then the character controller's probably not going to work. Like cover height will be wrong, like what you can vault over, so like then now you're breaking like how you traverse the space and things like that. So yeah, if you can, like regardless of what you're working on, what job you're going into, if it has an established metric system, familiarize yourself with that straight away, because it will speed up how fast you can build a space. Like if you know the default door height, if you know the default cover height, you can now just throw all these blocks like together, and you can come up with a very quick block out that is probably going to be metric compliant. But if you're just going in blind and trying to guess at this stuff, you're going to run in and wonder why it doesn't work. But yeah, metrics is definitely undervalued.
for sure, especially like upcoming. And for those who don't know what we mean by metrics, it's how it's the scale and the spaces between how you set up your space. So for example, we can talk about a main corridor space needs to be 4 meters, but a side corridor needs to be 2 meters, again, wide width. And then for your character height and camera, then the scale may need to be 5 meters. And it's these sort of things which, again, will help you, as you put, Jonathan, mate, is to make sure that the space fits right and that you don't bump into things or the camera doesn't clip through things. And it's very important. And
like the other reason it's important, because it's like you'll provide it to an artist, and it's like at the end of the day, it's nice to have these beautiful, like realistic spaces that are to scale, like real world scale, but ultimately they aren't compliant, if that makes sense. So like you can't always rely on like the real life values of how tall you think these things should be to build gameplay spaces.
Yeah, it's always make it believable.
Yeah,
not realistic. That's a thing that I always try mantra I kind of chant through. It came from Stuart Scott.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. With awesome perks and rewards, whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/Level Design Lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
with that, and I guess with metrics and blockouts, that brings us to a great topic that is happening during the time that we are recording this, and that is the fantastic Blocktober.
It is.
Which is, for those who don't know, it is a time of the month. It happens, I think this is second or third year?
Might be its third. I definitely did it last year, but I don't know if it ran the year before as well.
Yeah, so just a second or third, and this was created by, I believe it was Michael Barkley, who is a level designer in Naughty Dog. And I know Naughty Dog was one of the definitely the ones that spearheaded this from a AAA company, where you show the blockouts of your levels. It doesn't need to be artified. It doesn't need to be, super pretty. It is just the blockout of the levels, and we share this on Twitter, Instagram, or other social media for it.
Yeah, and I think it's just like it's nice to see the development a space can go through, and I think especially for people coming up to see how a level in maybe one of their favorite games actually started out as a bunch of building blocks, to see what it goes on to become. But like the important thing is like that basic blockout still has to like communicate the intent of what you're trying to achieve with your level. So when it does go to art or etc., the departments, they understand like communicating with you what you're trying to build and what you're trying to achieve.
For sure. I think the other great thing is, especially, I don't know how you felt when you were building your portfolio, mate, but I know myself and my friends coming up, we were like, oh, I can't show this because it needs to look pretty like a final game, which is not true, because that's not your involvement with it. So I think that's great, because now people can feel comfortable showing that stuff.
Yeah, I think we kind of mentioned a little bit off air. There's still that like kind of misconception, right? It's like if someone's looking to hire a level designer, they're not looking for how pretty the space is. They're looking for like readability. Does it have any use of like color coding? Like, this is like a bit of one out of left field. Do you supply a key with your blockout or your diagram saying what each of these colors means, like whether it's for cover, whether it's the goal or anything like that? It just shows a little bit of process, and that's the kind of stuff when you're looking for a level designer, you want to see that kind of stuff, like focused on layout and actually seeing what their building process was to get there.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing as well. And for all those who did take part or are taking part next year, is make sure that you're showing the iterations, because as you said there, mate, it's people are wanting to see how you've developed this level, how it has gone to where you are now and where you are showing it. And I think that's always an important part, because also I think this is such an important part of level design that people don't talk about it enough, which is again why I think Blocktober is great.
Yeah.
Or like maybe just people aren't absorbing the information of level design is about iteration. Nothing is done right the first time. So I think that's an important part of being a good LD.
I think as well that you're totally right. It's like the first time you do a pass of your level or whatever, take it from paper to in editor. Like I can guarantee you're going to change it. It will not be perfect first time. Like there's always some small tweak that'll make the traversal better, or the angling of this thing will work better. Yeah. But with that in mind, I always like, it's not always easy. It depends on your pipeline, but the more modular you can make your building blocks, the much better and quicker you can iterate on it to try a different entrance point, a different angle, even like coming in from at a point that you can get a better perspective of. And I like to try, and even when I do my personal projects, the more modular I can make it, I know eventually it's going to become this one solid piece, but especially during that iteration phase, like the more building blocks you have, the more modularity, then the quicker you can iterate and test different things.
For sure, I agree with that. And I think moving on from that then is you're talking about pipeline and the process. And one of the big pipeline areas that we spoke about off the air is the use of color in blockouts.
Well, I think we touched on it because color we talk about as a level design technique, like we talk about as a guidance technique for the player, but color can be used throughout all of development. You can use, like I mentioned the key before, you can color coordinate your space. So like these cubes you're putting together, they actually have meaning. They're not lost in the void. You can use it to communicate, like you touched on high and low cover. So like you can have blue and orange, and that can communicate to an artist. It's like, fine, you can replace this block with whatever you want, but like if it's a blue one, it has to be a high cover. If it's a low orange one, it has to be a low cover, and it just means that when you get it back or it goes through its art pass, when art assets come online, it's not necessarily going to break that combat space or break the gameplay space.
Yes. Yeah, mate. I think that's it. Is also, and it is important for. I recommend it for those who are doing a block out. Is as you're saying, like, highlight these things. Imagine that in this Blocktober you were going to give it out to an artist. So think about what colors represent. So, and it is hard because different colors mean different things. Like me and you spoke about blue being high cover. It's a tough one to do because blue can also mean water.
Yeah.
But for example, for the space that I'm doing for Blocktober, there isn't going to be any water in my area. So it's a safe bet to have it, as well as it has a texture. It's not just completely blue. It has a texture to, again, help highlight what is cover. And I think it also highlights such things as green can be grassy fields, maybe orange or brown is dirt or desert. You know, all of these things that can help, again, sell what your space is. And we were chatting about this as well, how it's so interesting to go through your iteration of this before you even actually maybe get into your blockout phase, but it is so crucial. And I showed Jonathon something I'm working on with, and you saw in some of the pictures, originally when I was doing a blockout, my walls were orange. This is before my cover was orange, and my floors were gray, just to help distinguish between the two, so it didn't all just layer into one. But then I got thinking, I was like, orange is too much of a strong color for what is essentially a wall, because the players aren't going to interact with all the wall pieces. There's certain parts you can use for cover, but it's not going to be like that. So then I switched it to be the same color gray as my floor. And then I showed it to a friend of mine, Manuel. He went through and gave me feedback. And that was one of the things he noticed was it's sometimes hard to see doors now because it's all just molds into wood. So then, and one of the pictures I sent Jonathon over was it's now a slightly lighter gray. Again, making sure it keeps with gray so it doesn't stick out as like, oh my God, this must be such a crucial part of the level. But it still helps to distinguish between the two. So again, all of these different things, as you mentioned, man, is just such an important part of establishing the use of color within your blockout.
It's like you say, it's very easy to overlook. I think when you're doing personal projects, like you said, focusing on the smaller spaces allowed you to focus on like the details and kind of like remember about all that stuff. And I'm fully aware when you go into full scale development on a game, like sometimes you don't have the time necessarily to do all these nuances, but as long as you're thinking about them, and like when you do have the time, you're still applying these, it's going to make your block out and iteration process so much smoother to go along with. Because like you say, during Blocktober, like apply them, practice them, understand how they can be used in live development, like use them as much as you can, or adapt them if need be. To do that bolder pass, just so you can still get the point across to whatever other department you've got to communicate with.
Yes.
But yeah, during Blocktober, I would definitely like understand the fundamentals, like understand how it applies, and even try it. Like have your block out just be completely grey or completely white boxed, as the name like usually suggests when you hear about it in the industry, and then start adding in some color and just see how it reads differently. It always makes a good comparison shot.
Oh, for sure. And I think that's two things you raised, which were really good points there. Is one thing, if you are going to do Blocktober and you say you're new to blocking out or you're still learning about it, make sure you keep that space small, just because, as we said, it's better for quality in terms of if you're trying to get this done in October, then it's easier for you to iterate on, as well as focus on the level of quality rather than a giant space.
Yep.
And then sorry, you go on, mate. I cut you off.
No, I was going to follow on that. It also means you have a finished product, right? You have a finished level to show at the end of this, instead of a big unfinished space.
Yeah. Yeah, mate, I think that's important. And then also do plan on your fundamentals here, because what's great, and we just talked about the different colors you could use for high and low cover, and maybe the scale that you're going to use. is if you start planning this now, then you will have your toolkit for you to move on to your next level, and that can be quicker because you don't need to think about the rules, the color coding, the metrics anymore, because you've already got that planned out in order to move on to something next time.
Exactly. Once you've got your toolkit, it just makes, because I think I had the same thing last year for Blocktober. Like, I went in kind of blind first. I hadn't defined everything because I was defining it for that first block out. But then my second one, I chose to do a bit of a bigger space, but I'd already had a bunch of predefined rules. So I knew what all my door heights were. I knew what basic cover height was. So it made it much quicker to throw together rooms and buildings and put them together. And like, even the same for my main and side paths, like just understanding that, it helps dictate the space I'm building.
Yeah, no, it's just such a great thing. So even if you don't manage to get your level finished maybe for this Blocktober, what you'll leave with instead, I think, is far more important, which is a brilliant pipeline, one that you understand, and then you don't need to do blockouts in just Blocktober. You can continue them on.
Yeah. I think that's another thing as well, like especially that I learned is I did a couple after Blocktober last year, just like outside of it, like practicing the fundamentals and stuff. But it is good to do. It's like I'm hoping one of them I do in Blocktober can be used as an environment for a little side project I want to do.
Awesome.
Just to kind of learn some other things, but it always helps to have an environment. I don't like just looking at like the vast space of Unity. I like to have a space to play around in.
No, that's it, man. I think that also sets up to another point with Blocktober, is like create a gym for yourself. And for those who don't know what like a gym is, it is essentially a space where you put down things to test, to try out, whether that is to mess with the doors, different door heights for single and double doors, different cover heights that work with you, and all of this. So like there's so much stuff that you can do in a gym to again help you set up for the next step with Blocktober. With it, mate. And I guess with that one, because we're going to wrap it up, because Jonathan and I are both busy men. That's why we don't see each other for every 7 years. But I guess before we go, mate, is there anything that you're working on for Blocktober?
So I've started something, and it's mainly to try a new pipeline that I want to try going between Unity and SketchUp. So I've used SketchUp on my current job to build some spaces, and it has a bunch of tool sets which are really good for metrics. I mean, it's architectural software for one, so obviously planning out spaces and things like that works really well. So I'm going to use that because it has all the fundamentals in there. I can build blocks, I can see the dimensions of my blocks, I can measure stuff out very quickly, and I can also color code it. And then I want to see about taking that into an editor. So that's kind of the first one I want to try, and that's going to be a bit more of a bigger scale sort of space. But I mentioned to you, I'm keeping it small in the fact the critical path will take you through maybe 2 to 3 buildings. And that's kind of the idea. The rest will be there, but they're more just to kind of establish the space. And then the smaller space one, which it'll be easy to get finished because it boils down the fundamentals, will be like a motel space. Kind of I've been playing Control and I can't get the motel out of my head. So that's why I want to build a motel environment. So you get inspiration from weird places. So
well, it's great that they've done a motel in such a great way. That makes you want to make one as well. I think that's always like a church is one that I've always wanted to do after play. I think it was either Uncharted 2. I think there was one in Uncharted 2. One of the Uncharted's definitely had a church, but it wasn't number 4. This was back on PS3, and it just blew my mind how it was used. And I was like, "Damn, I want to do a church.
I need to do that."
Yeah. And funniest thing is that when you actually look at churches, especially like European ones, quite like some of them are very symmetrical because it's meant to look like a cross, obviously to represent religious reasons. But it makes me just respect how they did it even more. Just there's a lot of nuance they did that was fantastic for it. Which is brilliant. But mate, if people want to reach out to you, how can they do so?
If you want to reach out to me and chat design or anything in general, really, you can get me through Twitter. I'm at Omni/92. if hopefully some people will get the reference, otherwise I just feel old. But
there'll be a link to that down below in case you don't care for the reference and just want the link. No, mate, that's great. And you can say, will you be doing any talks anytime soon? But you're off to EGX, right?
I'm off to EGX next week. So from when we're recording this, I'm doing portfolio reviews there. Awesome. I'm doing a back to crew panel with a bunch of other designers where we'll kind of just be talking about like our routes into the industry, like a little bit like what we've chatted about today. And then I'm doing a level design panel with a bunch of other designers from the industry as well.
Awesome. That sounds like it'll be good fun there, mate, for sure.
Be a busy few days.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully you'll meet some amazing people, and like, I think it's great that you're getting on and always doing this, man. Much respect for sharing the information.
Yeah.
All right, those who want to reach out to me for whatever bizarre reason, you can find me on Twitter at MaxPairs, or you can email into the show, leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. If you do want to support the podcast, head to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/leveldesignlobby. All right, everyone, we will catch you later and see you next time. Bye.